I don't care whether your favorite coach is an offensive coach. I don't care whether your favorite coach is a defensive coach. I don't care whether or not your coach or your favorite coach is dad coach football. I don't care. Whoever you talk to, whatever your favorite football coach is, I guarantee you if you sit down and you break down the philosophies with that individual about why they believe what they believe about the game of football, 9 times out of 7, that individual will give you some type of story about, I do it this way because this guy did it this way. I do it this way because the guy that I studied before me did it this way. I did it this way because an opponent did it that way, thought it was interesting, applied it to my program. Talk to any ball knower, talk to any college football coach in the world, and you will hear from them, or any football coach in the world, honestly, you will hear from them that they have stolen the parts of their football program. They have stolen ideologies of their football program. They have stolen typical or standard operations of their football program from other people. This isn't just in the football world either. This is how we operate as humans. We see something that is successful. We see something that works, and we either duplicate it, we either replicate it, or we renovate it. That's about it, right? We either duplicate it, we renovate it, or we create a new, right? We replicate it. We try to create exactly what they've done the same way. That's kind of human nature. So when we see Michigan, right, when we see the Michigan Wolverines go about winning a national title in the way that which they did this season, the first question will become how, right? How do we go about understanding how Michigan did what they did this year? Because they did it in a very unconventional fashion, right? They did it in a very different way than previous winners, particularly in the college football playoff era. This Michigan Wolverines national title team was very, very different from others. So when we say that, how do we go about understanding the how? How did they do this, right? The title of today's, film, or not film study, the title of today's show is explaining how Michigan did this. How? How did they go about doing it? So let's try this, right? First and foremost, San Diego, Stanford, San Francisco, Michigan. Not a lot of consistencies, not a lot of similarities between any of those football programs except for they won under Jim Harbaugh. Jim Harbaugh found a way to win at all of those programs. Now, this is the first time he's won at this rate at any of those programs, but nonetheless, dude was a winner at all of those programs and all of those organizations. So I think that's where we start with this Michigan discussion of how. Well, first and foremost, they've got great football coaching. That's obvious, right? This dude has won at every level. He's won at mid-major levels. He's won at Power 5 levels. He's won on the NFL level, one of the very, very few to win on the NFL level and then win on the college level, or win on the college level and then go win on the NFL level to return to college and have success. The across natures of football, this dude's won at a rate that other people really haven't. So I think first and foremost, that's obvious. They had great coaching over this regime and over this time period at Michigan. That's the easy one. The hard one to really put a nail into or put a finger on is the philosophy, how they've gone about playing football over these years under Harbaugh at Michigan, right? And the way that they've gone about it. And honestly, I've taken my stabs and I've made my jokes about the identity with which they've chosen to play football over the last couple of years, right? I didn't think it was necessarily possible for you to be able to run, cloud of dust your way to a national title in the world of college football nowadays, but at least they have an identity, right? I made my jokes about it. I talked about it. I poked fun at it. And we talked about the stagnation of the offense throughout the year. And then they go on to win a national title. But I don't think at any point did I ever make fun of the idea that they had an identity. In fact, I think that's one of the key components to becoming a national title football program. Like, you have to know who you are, and you have to consistently attack that and consistently build onto that and consistently, try to win with that approach and never waver from it, even though I do think there was a time period in the Michigan regime where they kind of wavered away from this 12 personnel, we're going to run the football, extra offensive lineman type stuff that Harbaugh's been doing dating back all the way to his Stanford days. So I think there was some swaying from this philosophy, but in the end, his philosophy of we are going to be a limiting possessions football team, we are going to be a run the football team, and we are going to be a play great defense football team. Eventually, those philosophies and that ideology, that's what created a national championship winner for Michigan. And honestly, they did it in a much newer path than the rest of them. Right? If I were to just lay it out like that, the idea that you're going to be a run the ball, play great defense, limit the number of possessions. The idea that you're going to be one of those football teams that win a national title, that is not foreign to college football. Alabama did that for the better part of Nick Saban's regime to start the run at Alabama, right? It was ball control. It was defense. It was suffocating, right? But the difference here and the uniqueness of this path, in my opinion, and the stats will back us up here, is that this unit and this football program took this path to national title success in a very different way, in the sense that the other teams that have been line of scrimmage based, limiting possessions based, great defense based, all of those teams in the history of college football have been absolutely loaded down with NFL football players. I'm talking about 4 and 5 stars, high quality 4 and 5 stars, dudes that in high school people told were dudes. And the only position group at Michigan that I can even look at right now on paper and say, golly, they have had a plethora of elite football players, first-round caliber football players at that position. They weren't even on the roster this year when they won a title. But I think this room that I'm going to talk about is a microcosm of the entire regime and the entire culture and the entire program at Michigan right now. And it's that defensive ends room. Okay, you guys know Aiden Hutchinson. You guys know David Ajabo. You probably don't remember Mike Morris, but those 3 names, those are 3 first-round draft picks at the defensive end position. And again, they are a microcosm of exactly what we're talking about here tonight. Aiden Hutchinson was the highest-ranked player of all of those guys. He was ranked 88th coming out of high school. He was not a 5-star. He was a 4-star. He was a number 2 overall draft pick. Okay, and you could argue he should have been the number 1 overall draft pick. And I know this is a Georgia station, this is a Georgia network, and saying that about Trayvon Walker, blaspheming, especially what he's done this year. But the career paths are kind of comparable right now on the NFL level. Nonetheless, David Ajabo, the next name, that dude was a number 220 in the country in rankings coming out of high school. Mike Morris, the other first-round draft pick that was drafted last year out of the defensive end position at Michigan, the backup to these 2 individuals, he was a 3-star coming out of high school. But if you look at all 3 of those individuals, none of which were 5 stars, all 3 of them shared traits. They were all 6'5 plus. They were all 240 pounds plus coming out of high school. They all lacked something to make them a quote-unquote 5-star. They all found that something during their time at Michigan to be drafted like a 5-star. So again, that room was higher recruited than any other room that they have on their roster, period, maybe apart from quarterback. But that room and how they went about designing a plan for what they wanted in the room and then executing that plan for what they wanted in that room, that is exactly how they went about building the roster from top to bottom all the way throughout, right? The title for Michigan is very talent-based, but it is also very much so coaching-based and development-based. And what will tell me this is what I had Jay Will run down today. I made a statement yesterday in my reaction show that they built this different than anybody else. They have not been recruiting at a top 7 level. They have not been recruiting at a top 5 level. Yet here they are dominating the line of scrimmage in a college football playoff game multiple times over against multiple different teams from multiple different regions across the country. And guess what? They did it with very, very minuscule levels of talent in comparison to the rest of them. Jay Will, give me the stats on this, please.
So the offensive player rating on average on offense is 341.2, and it's the exact same on defense. It's a singular point difference, 342.2 for the defensive side of the football. And so that overall team average on the 2 deep for Michigan was 342 on the dot.
And this 342, this is their average player ranking?
Yes, this is composite rankings for the 2 deep on both sides of the football.
And this doesn't even account, I would imagine there were some players that you found that weren't even ranked?
There was one player that had an NA next to his name. It was not even ranked. And there were multiple players that were ranked past 1100th.
So just for reference here, you said 342?
Yeah.
Okay, so just for reference here right now, I'm looking at the 24/7 composite rankings for the 2024 signing class from the University of Georgia. As of right now, it looks to me like 14 of the 28 signees are inside the top 230. So not even the top 340. I'm talking about the top 230, and the rest of them I mean, some of these guys are 4-stars and don't have rankings yet. I think that's a bigger point to what 24/7 and those folks have going on than anybody else. But nonetheless, this is a football program that did not recruit like a national powerhouse that developed into one. So I think if there are some studies to be done about what Michigan did and whether or not it's repeatable, we're going to talk about here in a second. But if there's anything to take away from this, it's that development matters, right, guys? Like, holy smokes, this is a football team that did not do any of this type of elite level recruiting, and yet here they are at the end of the year standing national title winners.
Yeah, I mean, development at the end of the day is the most important thing to any program. Yeah, if you can get a bunch of 5-stars in it, puts your chances of winning a lot higher, but you have to then develop those 5-stars into players that can actually play on the field. We see it all the time. You see a bunch of guys in the top 10, high recruiting rankings, go to different schools, and they don't pan out. That's because development. It's not that they weren't talented. Obviously, they wouldn't be 5-stars if they were.
And look, man, like they're hitting home runs with their 5-stars too. I think I looked it up. The only 5-stars on the roster are J.J. McCarthy and Will Johnson, the corner. And them some dudes, right? Those are some absolute dudes playing for them right now. So when they needed a 5-star, I think Will Johnson's from the Detroit area, or maybe from the local Michigan area. But nonetheless, when they needed a 5-star and they needed to land one, they did. And not only did that 5-star come to Michigan, but that 5-star played exceptionally well during his time in Michigan